you very much for joining us. We may have one or two members of the Superintendent Budget Advisory Task Force joining us as we get started, but we will begin for today, and our agenda as posted for today is, as always, to review in the beginning our meeting norms, which are listed on the bottom left of the screen. I'll give everybody a chance to review those on the agenda.
Superintendent, were we supposed to see those? Because I'm sorry, I'm not showing it on my screen.
I can share the screen. One moment.
Thank you.
So there are norms in our task force goals, if everybody can see those. And as we turn over to the task force goals, those were ones that were revised this year, as well as our norms. Are there any questions before we move on to the norms or the task force goals? Patty, in this view, I can't really see everybody. I don't know if you see any hands. Okay, great. Then we will stop sharing that screen. And I want to begin by thanking Assistant Superintendent Leticia Salinas for filling in for me at the last meeting when I wasn't able to be there. I know there was a lot of discussion regarding the expanded learning opportunity grants and how we might spend those dollars moving forward. And I wanted to go back and just touch on two important things for our task force on that subject. The first is that we will be sending out a survey this week. It's in translation right now. And that survey is for staff and community members. And that's part of what's required under the Ed Code for our plan to expend our expanded learning opportunity grants. And in order to craft that plan, which has to be board approved by June 1st, the Education Code stipulates that we need input from our school staff and from our community. And so that survey is going to go out this week. We'll be gathering that information. And in terms of the next sequence of events for those dollars, we will have two agenda items in our May board meeting cycle. Our first board meeting in May will bring that for information and discussion. And then at our last board meeting in May, we'll bring it for action and approval. And as you probably are very familiar, this would be similar to often what happens with an LCAP is we'll bring it for information in one meeting and discussion, and then for action at the second meeting. So our two board meetings in May will have a lot of discussion around those expanded learning opportunity grants. We'll be incorporating the feedback we receive from this task force and what we receive from the community as well as our employees as we craft some discussion points for the first board meeting in May. Then we'll hear direction from our Board of Education, feedback from our trustees, the community, staff, and then we'll take those revisions and filter them through an additional cycle and come back in the second meeting with a finalized plan. And I just wanted to make sure that we touched on those. Any questions on that before we move on to the meat of our agenda for the task force today? Okay, so moving on to our next agenda item is the recruitment and selection for the associate superintendent position. And as is noted, we have advertised for the associate superintendent position. Mr. Battle will not be returning next year. And this is not a conversation about who has been in the position in the past or who is in the position. This is a conversation to help us gather your input about our recruitment and selection for that position. And so I want to talk a little bit about what our recruitment process is, a little bit about what our interview process will be, and then hear from the task force about what it is that they are looking for in the next associate superintendent. So pending approval by the board on Wednesday for a contract with Leadership and Associates, we will have them help facilitate the recruitment process. And what that looks like can be varied depending on the level of support that a district seeks from a group like Leadership and Associates. And in this case, they'll be helping gather candidates for us. And I will take the information that I hear from you and refer that back to the lead consultant from Leadership and Associates who's working to gather excellent candidates for our interview pool. Once we have those candidates, then we will handle the interview process internally and go through a process similar to what we've used for the associate and assistant superintendent positions in the past. In terms of advertising, Leadership and Associates will take the lead on advertising for us. They will advertise through their channels. Also, those of you very familiar with recruiting in the administrative sector for education, we will be posting in EdCal, CASBO, reaching out to school services, and doing everything we can to spread a very wide net for potential candidates for this important position. And when we get to the interview process, we have a multi-round interview process. We make sure that we have stakeholders as a part of that selection. And then ultimately, we bring a candidate to the board for their consideration. And that's where this is really the discussion point today, which is to say, what is it that this group is looking for in the next person who's selected to be or recruited to be the associate superintendent for Fremont Unified School District. And so before we go into those, what I would describe as personal characteristics, work experience, training, overall background, I want to start with, I want to go back first to kind of the recruitment and the technical aspect. Are there any questions about how we're posting, advertising, or anything like that for the position? Checking each box. Okay, so as we move into the next section, we don't have a huge group with us today. So what I would ask is that if everybody, oh, let me go back. Trustee Campbell?
I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
I just wanted, maybe I didn't hear it, and I just wanted to check in with you. Did you say that there will be an internal posting as well, so that anyone within our organization who may want to apply for it can do so? Is that a period of time, or how does that work?
Anybody who would want to apply for the position that's internal could certainly apply. They can do that through Leadership and Associates. And that's a great question, Trustee Campbell. So the way it works when we use Leadership and Associates, a little bit different than some of our more traditional postings, let's say for a principal or maybe for a director. Those positions are most oftentimes posted on EdJoin, and the application process is handled through the EdJoin system. When we utilize a service like Leadership and Associates, an interested candidate reaches out to Leadership and Associates and requests the application materials be sent to them. And a part of that process is that Leadership and Associates is then in contact and in discussion with each person that's asked for an application. And so any internal candidates will need to reach out to Leadership and Associates if they're interested in applying. And so moving forward, since we're not a large group, I think if we can use the raise your hand feature, if everybody's familiar with that, and if not, you can raise it on the screen or just try and get my attention, and I will do my best to keep everybody in order. And I'll be keeping notes, and I'm sure Ms. Sandoval will be doing the same. And one of the things that I would like to start with is the personal characteristics of what we're looking for. And personal characteristics is a very broad term. And I don't want to take everybody's answers, but in my 20 years of work, we oftentimes end up describing a potential candidate as somebody who's really dedicated, who works hard, who has a good sense of humor, who communicates well. And, by the end of the day, it's like, okay, this person walks on water, right? And so I think, we want to kind of dig in a little bit deeper and think, okay, what do we know about Fremont Unified School District, and what kind of personal qualities and characteristics are going to be really important for success in this job? And so if we can start with that, and to give you a preview of where we're going, the next topic we'll cover will be what you want to see from their training and work experience. So let's start with kind of the personal characteristics. All right, I'm looking for Joanne.
Sorry, you would think I would know better. To not to unmute myself. So to me, and I think it fits in this category, I'm looking for a person that if I ask a question on any aspect of the budget, excuse me, that person can hopefully answer it and or give me a straight answer saying, I will get back to you, and then get back to me. It hasn't always been the practice that that's been the way that things are. You don't have to necessarily know it, but somebody who gives me that confidence. And in my mind, I think of Raul Parangao. I could ask him anything, and I may not like his answer, but I could trust it was a solid answer. It was based on fact and history. I need that feeling from who's ever in charge of our money.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm hearing from you there that we're looking for somebody who's going to be able to give us a factually accurate response, and that they're going to do that timely, and that they're going to be able to also tell you, I may need to look into this a little bit more before I can answer, but I'll follow up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it
Great.
sounds like it should be a natural, but it hasn't always been the case.
No, I think that's good feedback, and I think that's important for leaders in all positions, and for everybody in general. But it's always worth calling out, because that is an important characteristic to be looking for. And one of the things that I always try and describe is we have to be able to talk about the things that we know, and let somebody know when there's something that we don't, and go find that answer, because nobody can know everything.
No.
Okay, thank you. Any other input on what we might be looking for in terms of the personal qualities or characteristics of somebody that would be applying or considering this position? Maybe they're watching this recording as a well-researched candidate. What would we want them to know? We'll go Lucas, and then, oh wait, I lost Lucas. Sandy?
Okay, so I'm new at this, so please excuse me if I'm saying it wrong, but I know being in negotiations with CSEA, just looking for someone who is supportive. For example, I hate to go back to Parangao, but if we asked a question, he actually, showed us, so instead of saying, no, it can't happen, or this just isn't the way, he actually showed us and helped us understand. He was actually even essential in putting documents together for us to present so that we explained it correctly. So there was no misleading information going to our members, which was so helpful, very helpful, especially when we talked about increases and decreases. So that's essential. Someone who is willing to work with the bargaining units in our negotiations and not, frown upon it.
Okay, thank you. So someone who's willing to be very involved at the bargaining table, and then kind of taking on some of the comments that we heard earlier, somebody who's able to give that timely and transparent communication at the bargaining table as well.
Right, because often we get the answer of, I don't have the authority to approve that. So it's kind of, misleading. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's like, why are we at the bargaining table if you don't have the authority to make those choices? So we constantly keep going back and forth. Therefore, nothing is getting resolved.
Okay. That's good feedback. Thank you. Lucas?
I think one of the most important traits for any leader is someone who can develop positive working relationships. I think it goes without saying, but I think it's important to say that. The other piece that I think is critical for any leader anywhere is having a high level of integrity, someone who can develop trust. And I think without those characteristics, we won't be successful.
Thank you, Lucas. I think those are really important for this position because, as we know, this position oversees a very broad range of responsibilities. And so those relationships are going to be critical. And of course, the integrity will be paramount. Trustee Campbell.
I think Lucas read my mind, because that was the first thing that I had written down about building positive, great relationships across the district. That means with the principals, with the peers, with people that work with them. They have to really build those positive relationships, build on trust that comes from some of the things that I'm hearing in terms of knowledge. I did hear training, though, that they had to have a willingness to be able to train, because a lot of people may not, it's very complicated. And so if they have the, and I've witnessed, I don't hate to go back to Raul too, but he penciled it out for me. He would get it on a chalkboard and really show me to help me. And if I didn't get it, he would say, let me show you a different way. And then that's when I was like, oh, the lights went off. So, and so he had that kind of patience and that kind of willingness to really train me to help me understand what I didn't understand.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very important. And I think when you describe it across the many groups that we aim to serve in Fremont Unified, that's critically important as well, because there's going to be a very deep level of understanding for a lot of the nuance and conversation that happens within the business team. And as much as everybody would like to understand public school finances, it is a remarkably complicated system in the way that SACS codes work and how things have to be considered and calculated and expended. There's so many rules that don't fit how we conceptualize the general operation of a private sector business. So I think it's a great point, Trustee Campbell, that individual has to be willing to know the intricate details, but also shift it to a level that is helping everybody understand what's happening. So why don't we keep the conversation going, and if there's other areas that people want to touch on, that would be fine as well. If we move into things like what are the work experiences that you'd like to see this person have as a potential candidate? And another way to say that is, what are some of the trainings or other relative skills that they would have that are maybe a little bit different than what kind of integrity do they have? I think, an example would be, we heard earlier, we want someone who can do certain things as part of the negotiations team. So, as an example to carry off that might be someone who's got a demonstrated track record of being at the bargaining table in their prior positions. What are some of the other things that this group might consider important? Trustee Jones?
Yeah, I think this overlaps a little bit with the last area, but I'm looking for somebody who can help us with some long-term strategic planning. And a lot of times when we're talking about long-term strategic planning, it involves saving money over a period of time. And I think when school finances are the way they are, and we have, crisis after crisis coming up, and we continue to put off those long-term planning things. I'll give you an example. The last few times that curriculum adoption, textbook adoptions have come to us, it's been because the book that we're currently using is no longer in print anymore, and we can't get it. So we're in this like, now we must do this curriculum adoption. Where I don't want to see us being reactive with a textbook adoption. I want to see us, planning that out. And I'm seeing on this next agenda buying Chromebooks, and I want somebody who can help us with long-term planning so that we're purchasing a certain amount of Chromebooks every couple of years, rather than a giant purchase of Chromebooks all at once. And I think there's skill in that, because when you need to do planning to save money, and people want to spend money on something immediate, we need somebody who can help the community and help the trustees and help us all get on that long-term planning mentality, and see the value in, okay, we're saving money for this textbook adoption, and it's important that we continue to do that even when we're in this budget crisis. Or it's important for us to continue to save money to do these regular Chromebook purchases, even when we're in a budget crisis, because it's important to do that. I think that's a shift that we need to see, and somebody who has skill doing that would be really important for me.
Thank you, Trustee Jones. I think that's certainly a great point and very important to consider. And it's, as you said, it's oftentimes one crisis after another. There's not a general period where we see a whole lot of good news repeated from the state in terms of funding year over year. There's every once in a while a few windows like that, but don't necessarily see them in the next 2 or 3 years. Lucas?
I'd like to add to what Trustee Jones stated. I believe that when we think about business services, we have to think about it in the same way that we think of all of education, which is our district has a vision and we have a mission. And we have to think very strategically about how the things that we're doing, whether it be on the business side of the house, whether it be on the instructional side of the house, how do those things that we're doing actually align with our vision and our mission? And from technology's perspective, I have a lot of experience doing that, but it's relevant for every group in the district. So when we're making decisions, whether it be around budget, whether it be around technology, whether it be around curriculum adoption, instructional models, those are all things that we have to do every time we consider a decision. And so I would be looking for a CBO who can think about all of the business aspects and how that aligns with vision and mission.
Thank you, Lucas. Trustee Campbell.
Along those sort of same lines as Lucas is just kind of reading my mind today, I think. I really want someone who, in terms of skill, is able to articulate that, right? With confidence, so that people will be able to understand that they have confidence in what they're saying, right? Clearly articulate to and have experience presenting to the board, so that we understand the board and the community, so that they understand easily what it is that we're doing. I think one of the things that's really hard for people is when you don't put it in, if you don't like tell a story, you're just pushing out numbers. Raul was really good at that. He could tell a story or give a history or help us see, this is where we were, this is where we are, this is where we're going, based on the information that they were presenting to the board. So I would like for someone to be able to have that kind of skill and not just read off some numbers to me, because reading, I could do that myself, right? I could read numbers. I just want to have a story. I want to have a relationship with this budget, not just a bunch of numbers.
Thank you very much, Trustee Campbell. Joanne?
I would like to see somebody coming from maybe not a comparable size district, but maybe just still a smaller district who has come across a lot of the things that we will come across. You know, are our demographics being lowered? Are what's happening with money? Somebody who has connections, but has dealt with most of our stuff. I don't see us as a training district. I think we're too big. We need somebody who's done most of this stuff.
Great, thank you. I think that's a good point. So as I'm hearing that, I think what we're talking about is someone who's got kind of boots on the ground experience, or shoes on the ground that don't have to be boots. And sometimes I think you bring up a great point there, Joanne. Sometimes there's pluses and minuses to the size of districts, right? We're a very comprehensive district with a lot of moving parts. And I can tell you from my experience in both a similar sized district in San Ramon with 30,000+ students, and my experience in a district the size of Martinez with just over 4,000 students. The decision points are always the same because they're about what's best for kids. But there's pluses and minuses, right? Because sometimes it's, has your district experienced this? Do you have any experience with declining enrollment? Do you have experience with construction bond measures, with multiple construction projects happening at once? And sometimes that is different in large districts and small, and sometimes it happens in small as well. But I think you're right. This is not a training position. This is a high level position. It's number 2 in the overall structure of where the district operates, and it's a comprehensive, diverse district with something that we can get to in the end. I think one of the great things about this district is the staff and the community. And so, that's a very involved point where a person can't just be learning the functions of the job while trying to do what we talked about earlier, which is building successful relationships. That's a great point, Joanne. Thank you. Trustee Jones.
Yeah, you touched on this just briefly, CJ, but somebody who has experience with bonds and parcel taxes. We know overall we're an underfunded district compared to other districts in the Bay Area of similar size, and we rely then on local measures to fund us. And if we don't have somebody who the community trusts and can communicate effectively with the community, it's hard for us to pass those things, and we need to. And so if somebody has experience being in the CBO position during successful bond and parcel tax measures, who feels like they have a role in that campaign effort as a communicator, I think that would be really important.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's going to be critically important. As you described, we foresee a lot of things changing in the next few years, but I don't necessarily foresee LCFF changing. I think that's going to be our funding model for a while. And in terms of how that breaks down for districts across the state, Fremont Unified, based on our characteristics, doesn't always come out the same way that other districts do. And so we have to find other ways to supplement that to make sure we can meet the needs of our students. And parcel tax and bond measures are going to be critically important, both in considering how we might plan for ones in the future, and then also, I think, making sure we're compliant and really maximizing the dollars that we're being provided from our community now. So on both fronts, I think those are going to be critically important experiences. Are there other areas of experience, training, overall thoughts or considerations that we might want for this individual? Anything that you think we might be missing? Still looking for each box. So then here's my other question for you. If I'm talking to candidates, which I'm not yet, but let's say that I get a call from a candidate. Let's say that you get a call from a candidate, which likely isn't going to be the case, but I'm setting the framework for this next question, which is, if that candidate is out there watching this, what do we want the candidates to know about Fremont Unified? What do we want them to know about us, about the place that they're considering to come work? What's the reason they should come to Fremont Unified? And what's important for them to know about us? I think as much as we're interested in the characteristics and experience and training of somebody else, a really good candidate's going to want to know what what makes Fremont Unified School District a great place to be and a great place to work. So if we were going to advertise that to a candidate, what are some of the things that you would want to share with that candidate? Lucas?
I think one of the things I've been most impressed by is the district's willingness to try innovative ways to do things. I think that we are a district that in some cases really is willing to step outside of the box and think about challenges in ways that doesn't always happen in every district. That's a really positive thing.
Thank you. Sandy?
So one of the things that attracts me to Fremont Unified is the openness and willingness of all directors, managers, superintendents, willingness to sit down and talk with all staff and just collaborate, like having these task force, it's just collaborating with different positions, different facets of the district. So it's including and wanting the feedback of not just management, but of the other workers, getting the insight and trying to make things better. And I feel like, and I've learned this from Fremont Unified in the years that I've been here, is that I know that they strive to do the right thing for the right reason. And that's not always the case, but it's the intention. And the intention is the most important thing to me, is that it's always the intention to do the right thing for the right reason. Doesn't always come out that way, but the intention is there. And that's what makes it, for me, a very attractive and positive place to work.
I think that's a very good summary. Thank you. Trustee Campbell?
Well, they have a great school board.
Right. Those are the absolutes.
That's the absolute truth right there. We got a great school board. No, but actually, I'm kind of joking, but I'm not, because we are a very involved school board. So I think that's really important. A lot of school districts don't have school board members that are involved and who, work with the staff and ask good questions and just is really, really involved and being good leaders for the community. So I think that's important for the second in command to know that they have that kind of support, right?
Absolutely. And I think, to your point, Trustee Campbell, it's important for everybody to know, in the context of this position, when they're employed at the assistant or associate superintendent level, their contract is a contract with the board. So it is incredibly important for them to understand that, because this board is very in tune with what's happening and asks some great questions and is very involved. And I think, as we heard earlier, cares such a great deal for what all of our stakeholders think about what's happening. So that is a great asset for us and very important as well. Any other things that we would want to tell a potential candidate are successful areas of Fremont Unified? So I know I'm facilitating, but I'm going to add in a couple comments just for notation. And since my arrival in Fremont, I think the things that I would call out is real hallmarks of a great place is the people that I have worked with shoulder to shoulder have been excellent at their job. We have a lot of highly qualified individuals, and that's across the ranks from management to our school sites to everywhere that I've been. And that's from our FUTA team to our CSCA group to our SEIU group. I've seen incredible talent across all the spectrums of our district. And so I think, our team is full of people who are good at their job. And most importantly, in this wild existence of COVID and shelter in place and everything else that we've had, I've seen a ton of people who have just regularly been ready to go above and beyond. So there's a level of commitment to Fremont Unified and to our students that is really critical. And I think another selling point that we always keep our focus on the students, but I mean, our students are unbelievable. They are just amazing. And I think anybody who comes to work for Fremont, if you're coming from an outside organization, myself being one, I think you have to just take a minute and take in how incredible our student population is. I mean, I've had conversations with students this year that have just simply been amazing. And I think that's a real wonderful part of Fremont Unified. And all of our staff goes in, and our community and our parents and our guardians, they go into making and shaping those great students. But boy, when you get a chance to sit down and talk with our kids, you realize what a remarkable place this really is. So I think that's a selling point too. And I don't want to end on a negative note, but I do want to be practical and realistic too. And so we talked about some of the things that would be celebrations and successes for Fremont Unified. And you may be familiar with kind of an operation called the SWOT analysis, right? What's our strengths? What's our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? What are our traps? And so I think one thing I would want to also gather from this group is, what are some of the things that we see as challenges in the next 12 months, maybe the next 24 months? We heard about some of them. Trustee Jones mentioned long-term planning, right? But what are some of the other really key important areas where not only we might talk about the recruitment of somebody to help accomplish those things or address those things, but let's say when that person's hired and we sit down with them and say, here's two, if we just had to pick, here's two really important challenges that you're going to face in the next 12 to 24 months. And we want you to stay focused on those, right? And of course, we know there's going to be more than two because we work in education and there's always more than two challenges going on. But what would we maybe say to a potential candidate? What are going to be two of the top things that they're going to see as a challenge in the next 12 to 24 months, do we think? Or are there not going to be any? Sandy?
Wow, I'm really a shy person. So I think, don't laugh, Patty. One of the biggest challenges I see as a CSEA member is because of the budget cuts, the loss of jobs. That's going to be a challenge because our students are very important. So it's with, the teachers, with the classrooms, the school sites, the district office, without the paraeducators, then it makes it difficult on the teachers to have control over that. Without the office staff, it makes it difficult. We can't hire the teachers, and it's just so on and so forth. It's all a vicious cycle. So it's like, I understand as a CSEA member and the acting negotiation team, only acting negotiation person right now. I understand the importance of, we need to weigh it out and do the right thing for the right reasons, whether it's shifting and things like that. And that's just going to be a challenge. I know that this person's going to be a key component of that. And it's just a huge challenge because just coming in without sounding bad, he's already going to have a small little dagger in his back or her back, of, oh no more jobs lost. What are we going to do now? But it's inevitable in all sides, because no matter what, the district has to run. So if we have no funds, it doesn't run. But we need to try and look at the different jobs that are important. And that's what he's going to have a challenge, or she, I just keep saying she is going to have a challenge with. So that's kind of coming in,
Yeah.
Hey,
I think that's a great point, Sandy. And I think that a good candidate, if they're doing their research for Fremont Unified, should see that, because, we were very transparent with our community and our staff this year about our need for budget reductions. And so I think an interested candidate can look at those things and really see that. And I think that's probably got to be one of our main challenges that we would want to convey to a candidate is, like many districts, fiscal solvency. And, we have a reserve, but it's not as high as other districts. So how do we, I think as maybe Trustee Jones said earlier, how do we save the money, right? And that's a really delicate balance of trying to save the money, and create a situation where our structural budget looks better, but also try and help honor the incredible work of our employees at the same time. So I think that, you know, if I was going to maybe characterize it, it's that fiscal balance, that structural deficit is going to be a primary factor. We'll go with, let's see, I see Joanne and then Trustee Jones.
Okay, so I see declining enrollment as something very important that needs to be dealt with. If it's true, how is it happening? What does that mean? Closing schools, not opening schools? And I also see the conflict, not conflict, but the differences from maybe what the community wants. Like if they really are pushing for more AP classes, if we're having declining enrollment, that may be difficult to make sure it actually happens, or more difficult, smaller class sizes, with whatever has to happen. But those two problems seem antithetical to me, and somebody's got a new person would really need to be on top of those two areas.
Great, thank you. So being able to tackle that declining enrollment issue and make sure we're really understanding it and seeing what we can do within our control to offset it, and then trying to find that balance of offering our students everything we want to in a framework where we may have a decrease in revenue. Okay, that's good input. Thank you. Trustee Jones?
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous in the like the 2 to 3 year time frame. Every budget meeting that I've gone to through CSBA or the Alameda County School Boards, the presenters are talking about this cliff that a lot of districts are going to hit in the, I think, like the 2 year time frame, when, you know, this next year we're going to see this influx of cash like we've really never seen before. Those are one-time funds and they need to be used for specific purposes. And we've been held harmless for ADA. And at a certain point, the clock runs out on those things. And so we're going to need somebody who is skilled looking ahead to help us prepare for that cliff that we're going to hit, and help the community understand as well. You know, because I know we're going to look flush next year, probably, in some ways anyway, but that's temporary. And we need to make sure we're planning for when the clock runs out, and how we manage, you know, when we're out of the protection of safe harbor with our ADA and some of those challenges that we're going to have. I know that it makes me nervous when I think 2 years out.
Thank you, Trustee Jones. I think that's a great point. And the description you gave of the cliff is very accurate. And I think for those in our public who may be watching it, it's an important consideration, because there's been some legislative action with the budget bills that have been passed that really lead to that, which is, as you described, we have each year traditionally in the budget, we can be held harmless and we can use the higher of our last 2 years for enrollment. But with COVID-19, they used the P2 number, which is our second attendance period from the year prior. And they're allowing us to still use the highest of those numbers next year as well. And so if you're a district in declining enrollment like us, you might be using a higher number, and that cliff starts to get a little bit steeper each year out. So it's a good point. And we are expecting, as you probably everybody has seen in the headlines, an influx of one-time dollars in response to COVID for next year that will have categorical limitations to how they can be spent and time requirements for when they have to be spent. So I think that the ability to foresee that cliff and strategize around it is going to be a really important challenge.
Right. And I think, you know, I was in a facilities advisory committee meeting earlier, was it end of last week? I'm losing track of like when I've been in meetings. But there was a demographer again going over declining, you know, confirming declining enrollment. And a lot of it is related to declining birth rates. So it's stuff that we don't control. But I'm also concerned about how what we've seen, what what the pandemic has allowed people to do with remote work means that they don't necessarily have to live even in the same state where they work. And with the high prices in the Bay Area, I'm nervous that our enrollment problem is going to be exacerbated by people who have realized I can live someplace that is much less expensive and still work for this Silicon Valley company, taking them and their children and their families with them. And that sort of problem is again, something that we don't necessarily control. It's a factor of the cost of living in the Bay Area. And now that people realize that they can work remotely very efficiently, that's not a barrier anymore. So I think we may see that enrollment problem, that cliff of ours, become even steeper.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Trustee Jones. Trustee Campbell?
Thank you. I just had a couple of things that I wanted to add to that. One of the things that's going to be really, really important, and I know Kelly's been doing her very, very best, is the bond. Finishing out that facilities bond and finishing getting these middle schools converted, dealing with all of the decline enrollment. Lila Bringhurst is a thorn in our side that we have to make a decision on. So all things facilities is going to be really, really key and important to us. Just like Joanne had mentioned with the decline in enrollment, what are we doing with schools? I mean, we need to have somebody who's really on top of that and who really understands that for us. I also like one of the things that I was really concerned with over the last short while is the way that we're managing the sort of the budgeting process and the way we're communicating that to the public. I mean, we don't have like what if scenarios. If this happens, this is what's going to happen. If this happens, this is going to happen. It was always a wait and see. We got to wait and see what the governor's going to do. We got to wait to see. But I suspect that there's a lot of things that we do know and that we should be communicating that. I don't want to give false hope, but I also don't want us to be not giving anything, not saying anything. You know, we can do scenarios and we can say, you know, if the governor comes up with this, this is the way it's going to look. We're not making any promises, but we're at least giving some information that gives some kind of insight into our budget, into our savings, into what is going to happen in particular with raises for our employees. Are we going to be giving raises? Will we have money to give raises? What is that going to look like? Are we setting it aside? All of these things that we have to do some scenario planning around so that we would at least get a clue. I know as a board member, I need that to understand that as a board member. So I'm certain that the public would want to see that as well. So that was my foreseeing with budget fluctuations and facilities. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Victoria?
Thank you. I was I just couldn't not tag on to Trustee Campbell's notes there about the scenarios, the flexible thinking, really being proactive. I think is really critical. And we've talked about this actually a little bit on this task force, that having business and having people in the district that have their pulse on both the community and employees, so that in situations foreseeable or not, they're a little bit more ready to pivot. So we talked about it here, if we got X amount of money, what are our priorities to increase? On the not as happy side, if we have to make cuts, let's already have those conversations. And so everything isn't either in panic mode or, oh my goodness, we have to do this 1 month of outreach because how are we going to spend this money? What would people want, for services? So just kind of looking forward in that sense. And I thought a little bit regarding the ELOG funds, we had maybe started on that conversation too, so that then when we're in the situation where we're looking forward to like a survey that you had noted, or the couple meetings in May, that sort of ongoing work has already been done, and then having a leader who charges that.
Thank you. Anything else regarding challenges that we might be facing, or anything that we've covered this far regarding this position? Other celebrations that or things that we would want someone to know about Fremont and why it's a great place to be? They obviously already know many of those things, or they wouldn't be applying. Or are there other things in terms of characteristics or work experience you think we might have missed that you want to cover? I think this group has certainly done a good job, and to your credit, I mean, I do think that when you have a lot of these conversations, you end up with, like I said in the beginning, we need this person to be a perfect communicator, excellent with the numbers, build relationships with people. And, that rightfully so, when we talk about the people we want in leadership positions and the people we want in general, we want the best people around us. So we're going to describe them in the best possible terms. And so I think that what we've described here are good, solid examples that aren't just generalizations. They're very key points of what we want in this individual and what they may bring to the table, and then how we help them be successful. I think that's, a critical component as well. It's really important to hire the right person, but then once we have that person hired, especially when they're coming into a new organization for them, if it is someone from outside the organization, or even if they're in a new position, there has to be that question of how do we all play a role in helping them be successful. So that's a responsibility that we can all share as well. This didn't go quite as long as I thought, so we're about 15 minutes or so ahead of schedule. Is there anything for the good of the group on this topic before we move to any suggested agenda items or next steps?
Superintendent?
Yes.
I just want to echo that point with you about helping people be successful. I think that is I think that's an excellent point, because you don't want to bring people in and then, sabotage their careers or make it difficult for them to get along with you, and, just be mean and uncooperative. And I think that that's a great leadership quality, is to be able to say, we're going to bring you in and we're going to help you be successful. And I think that it's a two-way street now. I mean, you're not going to let people just walk all over you at the same time, but you definitely want to be able to have a onboarding process that creates a positive environment for people who are new to a position and new to an organization. So I really respect that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will move now to any suggested agenda items from this group. Are there any things that you would like to see covered this year? Ms. Sandoval, I apologize, I don't have the screen up in front of me, but you may be following my thinking. Our next meeting, do we know when that is? Sorry, you're on mute. Sorry, Ms. Sandoval, can you hear me? You're on mute.
My apologies, I was looking it up for you.
Oh, I've got it as May 17th.
And I don't see a May meeting, but that could be correct.
Okay. I wrote down May 17th. That doesn't.
I also have May 17th on my calendar. I'm not sure where I got that, maybe from Joanne, but I have the same thing.
Okay,
and
so
honestly, I think that might be nice, because I think it's between the two May board meetings, and being able to tap into this group before that final May board meeting, I think would be helpful for me.
That is actually correct. May 17th and then June 21st.
okay.
And under the May 17th meeting, we do have an asterisk that, depending on the governor's proposal, may revise, that might that might change, but as it stands, May 17th is the upcoming meeting.
So there may be a couple of points there depending on, I would have to go back and look. I don't have it in front of me, the date of the May revise. But I think Trustee Jones, as you mentioned, that conversation about being in between the two meetings where we're discussing the expanded learning opportunity grant dollars certainly will be, I think, a great point for this group to come together and have some more conversation on, so that our other trustees can view that conversation, and I can help share the summary input from this group for our board as well. Is there any other topics? And the other topic obviously naturally would be if the governor's revise is present and close enough, that will be kind of the first time we really get a picture of that. And as you guys all know, that's usually released, and then within 24 hours, all of the state agencies, CASBO, CSBA, CTA, AXA, everybody has a kind of their paper out about what it means for us. And that's the good part about that, is the state turns around the tangible information from the governor's revise really quickly. So we should be able to get some tangible information on what it means for Fremont Unified very quickly. Anything other than those two topics that we might want to be looking at either for May or for June?
I'm wondering because, so if it would be good for the group and also to help us brainstorm on priorities, to talk about things in our district that we typically can utilize one-time funds for. Trustee Jones was talking about textbook adoptions, which might be, paid for over a couple years, and not have to be, done. That's an ongoing forever expense, versus other areas. And so I'm going to just be optimistic here. So let's say, if we're looking at ELOG, which is the increase in funds, but they're one-time funds, but also the May revise looks amazing. And then here are some, things that fundamentally in our district we would want to improve or increase, or areas that we would want to look at investing funds, but that's why they are ongoing funds. And I think then, as a committee, we could talk a little bit about which is which. Similarly, if we go the other direction and maybe once again, we don't get COLA, I don't even want to throw that out there, but let's say we have to go another year without COLA, versus we might still see, we're going to have to decide, about the one-time funds for the ELOG grant, but there are certain things that we will typically not utilize that money for. So just to kind of kickstart that conversation.
Thank you. So it kind of as a framework for the ELOG discussion, and maybe depending on what we get in the May revise, how do we conceptualize our one-time dollars versus ongoing, and how creative can we be in that? Because there's sometimes creative ways to make one-time dollars last through a cycle or two, depending on what the end date is on those. And, I don't know exactly what we're going to see in the May revise, but the revenue projections have continued to outpace expectations, which is generally good news. And it has not really been a tendency of Governor Newsom to offer one-time dollars in his budgets like Governor Brown used to do. But, that may be something that changes a little bit this year, just given all the circumstances that we're seeing. So it's a good point for us to consider. Trustee Campbell.
Yeah. In the past, and we don't have to do this, but I'm just thinking, in the past when we were in sort of budget fluctuations and things were just going wishy-washy, we would have a standing budget conversation or something from budget on our agenda so that the public could see, so that it wasn't so infrequent that we were having these, financial conversations so that the public could see it. I'm just wondering if this group has any idea on the frequency by which we might want to do that, so that when we have our board meetings, there is at least something coming out of the finance department, and that other than facilities.
Good question, Trustee Campbell. So to give that some framework, we have our, kind of in the beginning of the year, you guys know the cycle. We have our unaudited actuals, right? And then we have first interim, second interim, and then May revise. And, you know, one thing that'll be a little bit different this year is we'll have this conversation in May about the expanded learning opportunity grants, and then LCAP will follow in June. And maybe that's a place where we can help provide an additional comprehensive picture of our finances, not just the isolated parts of those plans, but any input from the group on the frequency and when we should be maybe bringing that conversation forward for the board and the community. Sorry, the system broke. Everybody raised their hand at once.
And forgot that they can't talk at the same time. They can sing together, but they can't talk together, right? I would just like to, you know, if when there is information that is important for the community to know, to make sure that it's available through a public meeting was what I'm asking. And you know, 3 or 4 times a year may not be enough. That we might be able to, you know, have it a little bit more frequently.
Yeah, I think that's good for us to consider, and how do we utilize that practice to then maybe, as we described earlier, make it more digestible, make it more transparent, make it more tangible for the community to really understand and see where we are on a regular basis. Okay. So it looks like we've got a couple busy meetings in front of us, which is good because I know all of us are looking for a little bit more stuff to do. And I do want to kind of wrap up today by thanking you. I know that there is a lot happening for all of us. And this time of year, even in a non-COVID world, is the busiest time of year. So I appreciate everybody being diligent about being here and present for the meeting and engaged in the conversation. I look forward to taking this feedback and summarizing it not only for our board in terms of the candidate, but also to our consultant that would be working with us pending approval of the contract for Leadership and Associates. I think that will help them in their recruitment process. And I look forward to seeing a broad and diverse pool of candidates for our board to consider to help serve our community and our students. And I really appreciate everybody being here this afternoon. So thank you. And if there's anything extra, you can all reach out to me anytime you need to, either via email or call, or if you're around, come on by. It's always great to see humans in person. Thanks for everything. Have a great rest of your day.